Sí, va bé. Well, I'm Joana Barbany, General Director for Digital Society in Government of Catalonia. Soc la Joana Barbany, soc la directora general de Societat Digital de Catalunya, del Govern de Catalunya. Farem aquest acte en català i en castellà, i en català i en anglès, d'acord? Serà bilingüe, teniu gent que pot traduir les preguntes que feu del català a l'anglès i al revés. I faré la benvinguda en anglès per la gent que està fora. So, good morning and welcome to the seminar Technology, an Opportunity or a Threat for Democracy. Thank you so much for being here with us after a very intensive week in terms of technology-related events and meetings, especially for those of you who have participated in the Smart Cities Expo World Congress held in Barcelona until yesterday. We are really happy to see how the Smart City Congress, along with other major events such as the Mobile World Congress, is placing Barcelona and Catalonia as a whole in the center of the global discussions and contributions on the role of technology to improve our lives and our societies. Also, many thanks to all of you who are watching us on internet. Please feel to contribute with your comments, tweeting them with the hashtag eDemocracyBCN. The same goes for all of you sitting in the room. Podeu fer tuitejar d'acord amb el hashtag eDemocracyBarcelona. Thanks a lot to all the speakers, those here in Barcelona and those who will participate online. Gràcies a tots els ponents que participareu avui. Today's event has been organized by the Government of Catalonia in cooperation with Gov2U and the eDemocracy Foundation and with the support of Diputació de Barcelona, CiviCity and Telapolis. Let me offer you a line on the three main organizers of the event. The Government of Catalonia, through the Department of Digital Policies and Public Administration, whose leader, Minister Puigneró, will address you some words in a while, is committed to elaborate with the civil society and with the companies a chart of digital citizen rights and responsibilities. As a matter of fact, today's event is the kickoff of all the preparatory works that should let us count on a draft of chart in the coming months. We hope to be in position to present it by next summer at the latest. On the other side, Gov2U is a European non-profit organization founded in 2005 in Athens by a group of professionals from the fields of legislative ICT and community activism, whose work is based on the idea that the new means of communication are essential to develop a new and more inclusive form of direct and participatory democracy. And eDemocracy Foundation is a research center on advanced internet technologies and open learning labs. The foundation defends the idea that digital distributed work allows citizens to experiment with new distributed forms of political structures and actions. In this sense, cities, regions, and countries are becoming living laboratories of digital citizenship. We've decided to run the event in both Catalan and English. Com us he dit abans, farem les presentacions en anglès i després el debat posterior en català o en anglès. I si algú necessita ajuda, doncs el Marçal, que està per aquí, us deixarà el micro i us farà la traducció de català a anglès o d'anglès a català. I llavors hi haurà dos panels, there will be two panels. The first panel will concentrate political stakeholders giving a special attention to the role of local authorities when it comes to trigger citizens' political participation through technology. As security is one of the main concerns of governments and public administrations in general, when planning to launch online voting or other digital tools of participation, we've also invited a Barcelona-based tech company, which is leading the global market of online voting systems. The second panel will gather several experts and hacktivists to discuss the broad implication of the growing development of civic tech and digital democracy in terms of how we understand politics and how the relationship between citizens and decision makers may evolve. We'll be able to discover some interesting experiences and proposals coming from several points of Europe, like Iceland, Estonia, and Catalonia. And just for acabar, as I told you, we expect you to participate in this debate, so we have invited to open a discussion with the public after every panel. All in all, we should wrap around at 1 o'clock, at one in the afternoon, at mid time, and we will finish with a cup of cava offered by CB City, another Barcelona-based CB tech company. I would finally thank Telapolis for offering us the possibility to live stream the event and to facilitate the contributions of a couple of our panelists who will participate from quite far away, Scotland and Estonia. So let me now pass the floor to the Minister for Digital Policies and Public Administration of the Government of Catalonia, Mr. Jordi Puigneró.
Molt bon dia, good morning, secretària, directores generals, diputats, diputades. Welcome to Catalonia and welcome to this very important event. We've seen there's actually a famous writer, South American writer, that said that things happen now, but we don't understand them much later. And this is why today we understand how important and the impact of some technologies in the first and second industrial revolutions. Technologies like the steam engine or the discovery of electricity, they were very important, and to understand how important how important were these industrial revolutions in our societies and in our economies. The countries that really led these industrial revolutions were countries that led the world economies and our wellness states. So this shouldn't be the change. This shouldn't be different now. It means that in this digital revolution we are now living in which internet is one of these key tools that is changing everything. It has changed in the past, or it has changed over the past 20 years the way we have been communicating between each other. It is changing the economy, and it's also changing how do we govern, and it's also changing our democracy. The thing is, as good as the answers are the questions we make about this process. No? I think the question we have today, event, technology, an opportunity or a threat to a democracy, it's a very good question. Because my answer to this question would be both. It's an opportunity, but it's also a threat. And so we have to be, we have to try to understand what that means. Very recently in China, we've seen there is a program in which people, it's a program which people is being evaluated in terms of their opinions. There's sort of a trusting program of the people, which I thought it was a chapter of Black Mirror, but it is not. It's actually a real program. This is something which obviously we need to analyze from a European perspective view. How technology is making it possible to be able to push such programs. And this is obviously something that technology is not, I would say, it's the way we use technology. Technology as itself is not something bad, but the way we use technology could be used in a bad way. So let's not always blame on technology, but let's blame on how do we use technology. This is something that has happened, obviously, always in the history of humankind. There was always been a very small bunch of people that has want to control the rest of the people, or to control the freedom of the rest of the people. And this won't be different now. With the excuse of terrorism, immigration, we will see the attempts of trying to control more the population and to use technology for that purpose. I think that it will be very difficult to fight against that, but what we have to do, in my opinion, is to tools on the other side of the balance, to put other technologies to protect us from this type of programs. And I'm talking about technologies like blockchain or others, which can really help us on respect what we believe are basic fundamental rights, and that in which Europe, we can have a different model on how this digital revolution is being tackled around the world. And I think that there are two issues that are very important for battling back on this intent of the world becoming a big brother. One is, I would say, this new digital citizenship, an empowered and skilled citizenship that can handle this digital era. And also, let me point out an important factor. The way we produce technology, the technology sector is today still a man's world, which means that we need to put women on board. It is very important that, or it is unacceptable that although women represent 50% of our population, only 18%, 20% of women are on board in this digital revolution in terms of technology production. It is very important to have women talent and also the woman way of view on the world to be also part of this technology production that will be very important in this digital revolution. So ICT women programs are also a thing that we should all have on our agendas. And I think that at least from the Catalan government, we believe that this is something important to have on the agenda. Let me just now go specifically on Catalonia, because we know what this digital repression means, because we've suffered on this area. As you all may know, last year here in Catalonia we held a referendum. On those days we saw some practices being done on the net in terms of digital repression that we believe that are unacceptable in Europe in the 21st century. So we believe that, and this is not being said by the Catalan government, it's being said by various organizations and institutions around the world, from Electronic Frontier Foundation or from ISOC or even from some digital rights organizations in Europe, that what happened around the 1st of October of last year in Catalonia has been one of the biggest incidents in Europe regarding digital repression. We believe that this should not happen again in Europe and in Western democracies. So from the Catalan government, we are going to work very hard, and we've done so by giving some statements to the European Commission on that issue, so that it's not happening again in the future. Permeteu-me ara, per això, que em passi al català. Mireu, nosaltres, evidentment, el tema de la democràcia digital, el concepte d'adaptar les noves formes de governança a aquesta nova revolució digital estaran en el cor de les polítiques digitals del departament. Creiem que per afrontar aquest repte, entre moltes de les mesures que hem de tirar endavant, n'hi ha dues molt importants. Una d'elles, evidentment, és avançar en tot el que fa referència a la legislació. I, per tant, des que avui també tenim aquí alguns diputats i diputades, des del govern ja ens comprometem, com ha anunciat molt bé la directora, a que això d'avui sigui una miqueta el tret de sortida a la Carta de Drets i Deures Digitals, que volem que es desenvolupi en el nostre país en aquests propers mesos. I en aquest sentit em comprometo també que en el si dels debats que es faran pel Fòrum Cívic i Social per al debat constituent, aquest sigui també un dels temes importants a debatre. No entendríem que en un moment en el qual estem discutint sobre quin i com hem d'afrontar els drets civils i polítics i els conceptes de la llibertat i de la democràcia en l'era del segle XXI, aquí no s'incorporés també un debat profund sobre com les tecnologies digitals afectaran aquestes noves governances, com afectaran a la privacitat, com afectaran a tots aquests àmbits en els quals els ciutadans cada dia hi estem més implicats i en fem més ús. I en segon lloc, cal també un pla integral del concepte de formació i empoderament en l'àmbit d'aquesta nova ciutadania digital. Aquest també és un dels àmbits en els quals, des del Govern de Catalunya, ens hi concentrarem perquè entenem que el ciutadà, i per tant el concepte d'aquesta nova ciutadania digital, en una era digital passarà a ser un element cabdal. Aquí estem parlant, evidentment, de conceptes, com he explicat abans, de formació, tant en els més petits, com també en sectors que no s'han incorporat i que no volem que es quedin enrere pel que fa a la formació relativa a ser capaços de no només ser usuaris en aquesta revolució digital, d'aquestes tecnologies, sinó sobretot poder-ne ser productors. I, per tant, aquí hem de ser tots. Com he dit abans, no podem desaprofitar el 50% del talent de la nostra societat, com és el talent femení, i en aquest sector encara és un sector massa masculinitzat i, per tant, necessitem també incorporar a la dona en aquest àmbit. Per acabar, deixeu-me dir que aquest serà un segle digital i ciutadà, n'estic convençut, i, per tant, jornades com la d'avui ens han d'ajudar precisament a com abordem a la resposta a aquesta pregunta d'aquesta jornada. Si la tecnologia serà una oportunitat o una amenaça per la nostra democràcia. Responent, com he dit abans en anglès, a la pregunta, penso que la resposta és clara i evident, amb dues. És una gran oportunitat, però també hem de saber tractar els perills que això comportarà. Catalunya serà digital i ciutadana o no serà. Moltes gràcies.
Bon dia. Good morning to everyone. Let me introduce you the people who's with me at the table. We have Jordi Puiggalí from CITEL, Carles Agustí from Diputació de Barcelona, Arnau Mata from Ajuntament de Sant Vicenç dels Horts. And also we have Councillor Jenny Leydin by Skype. I don't know if she's here. Let me see. Do you know if Jennifer is here? Albert? He must be with the councillor. So we can wait just 2 minutes waiting for Jennifer, and if not, we will begin with the... Okay, Jennifer?
Yes, hello. I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, good morning from Barcelona.
Good morning from Glasgow.
Hello. Can we see in the picture Jennifer, please? Because we don't see you, but just 1 minute. I don't know if she will be here. Well, let me introduce you between, while we are taking here your picture. Jen was born in Glasgow's South Side and lived in Glasgow after all her life, attending Cuthbertson Primary and Showlands Academy. At the age of 26, after gaining a BEc in psychology and MEC in research, methods and statistics, Jen moved to Parkhead. Since then, Jen has worked for the NHS, starting in Work Hill Hospital in a variety of roles, including admin assistant, junior doctor inductions, and pediatric stem cell transplant quality manager. Jen also worked for 3 years with Marie Curie, delivering palliative and end-of-life care service redesign projects for Arsley and Bute. Jen's key interests are in health and social care improvement, with a focus on developing person-centered services. Jen became actively involved in politics in September 2014, serving as branch organizer and election agent in the Scottish Parliament in 2016 elections, EU referendum, local authority elections, and general elections in 2017. Jen was elected for the first time in 2017 as councillor for Carlton Ward and appointed to the city cabinet as convener for equalities and human rights. So, Jenny, if you want, you can begin with your speech. Thank you. You have 10 minutes, okay?
Thank you. Can you see me or? Okay,
yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invite. Sorry I couldn't be there today in Barcelona. I've had a number of committees that we had to be on today. I'd like to thank you for inviting me along to this very important debate. Digital participation, civic participation, getting our citizens involved is something that's very close to my heart. It's important that we have citizens involved to help form and prioritise our political debate. I wanted to just give you a little bit of a background in terms of some of my roles and responsibilities. As you've said in your introduction, I was elected for the first time as a representative for the Carlton wards, and I've also got the responsibility for equalities and human rights within Glasgow. My main role is around how we represent the interests of local communities, how I build relationships, ensuring that citizens are involved, they're consulted and they feel empowered. And this involves taking on local campaigning and issues and ensuring that we bring local resources into the area. Now, I wanted to, we're talking a little bit about political debate, and how I first got involved really was at the Scottish referendum. As the Scottish independence referendum in 2014 played a major role in really increasing citizens' participation in politics. What we had seen was the highest turnout for an election in many years, with over 84% actually taking part in the referendum, despite the fact that it didn't quite go the way that I would have preferred it to. So it is clear that online, using social media, being involved in technology is providing us with new ways of reaching our communities and our citizens. In terms of, I wanted to give a little bit about the Glasgow context, because I think this is quite important in terms of how we are approaching our digital and citizen participation. We have the largest city in Scotland with over 600,000 citizens. We're the most ethnically diverse in Scotland. We support over 4,000 asylum seekers at any given point. We have around 130,000 individuals from over 130 countries which study in Glasgow. But one of our biggest challenges, and this does relate to how we get people involved, and it drives all of our policy work, is addressing massive inequality and poverty we have within the city. We have 1 in 3 children living in poverty, for example, and we have probably the worst health record in the EU. In terms of our current political participation, our local government is elected every 5 years, and we have 89 representatives for the city, and that's approximately one elected member per 6,700 citizens. So it's quite a rate. But one of the key things about our citizen participation in local government is it's historically very, very low. In our elections last year, we had only 39% of our electorate turning out. So that goes to show that there is something going on within our citizen participation, which means that people are not getting involved. So in terms of why we are really interested in using technology, particularly within the local authority context, is because we have a number of long-standing challenges, like our deprivation, our continued restraints in budgets, and we're always looking to make sure that we're reaching out to our citizens, particularly those who are hard to reach. And technology has provided us with that platform to redefine our relationships with citizens and find new ways to interact. So what we have historically done is use technology as ways of streamlining services, but we're now slowly moving towards how do we use that to deliver better outcomes for health, for well-being, in terms of experiences for citizens. How do we get more people involved in partnership working, and how do we empower our communities to take part in local decision making? I mean, there are obvious risks around this, and the previous speaker highlighted some of those around, how do we make sure there's inclusion, that there's capacity building, and that we protect people's rights to privacy. So one of the things that we are really strongly working on in Scotland is community empowerment. It's a key legislative policy for us, and it's about how we encourage communities in our decision making. One of the mechanisms we do that is through participatory budgeting, where we are working towards devolving 1% of all local government budgets to be determined by local communities. But one of the biggest challenges we have with participatory budgeting is making sure that citizens have input to their decision making. And this is where technology can really come in. Because what we often find with offline or groups, it tends to be the same people that are around the table. We have exclusion of particular equalities groups. So, for example, disabled people who may not be able to get to meetings because they're in buildings that are inaccessible. So this is really a way that we can make this come into its own. We had one of our recent examples was with the Euro Championships 2018, when Glasgow was co-hosting with Berlin the championships, and we ran a participatory budgeting fund. So we had a festival programme that supported cultural events in parallel with the sporting fixtures that we had on in the city. And it was inviting communities from across Glasgow to propose artistic and cultural projects which celebrate people and talent of the area. Now, our normal mechanism would have been to go out to our local communities and go to various well-known community groups, where in the end, what would end up with happening was we had the same people who were getting the funding, and it was probably the same programmes that were being delivered. But through this online participation that we used, we had 69 proposals that were brought in. But the most important part was we had nearly 14,000 votes cast online to make decisions on how that £60,000 would be allocated and which projects would see that. And that just gives you a small example of how you can use digital participation and digital methods to be able to include people who are not normally sitting around the table. Another thing that we have decided to do here in Glasgow, taking on board the risks and the opportunities and the challenges with technology, is taking a strategic approach to how we embed that in our policy making and our service design. We're very clear that we want to use technology as an opportunity to deliver better outcomes. It enables transparency, it enables community empowerment, And it also helps with things such as prevention and early intervention, and asking citizens, because, you know, as politicians, we have very difficult decisions sometimes to make in terms of budgets. So it's asking citizens, how can we prioritise those? What is your need and how can we support you best? And that citizen participation is absolutely key to this work. And within our partnership, we have business, we have education, and we have voluntary sector. And our focus is about how we reach the most disconnected citizens in our society. So that's people who are socially isolated, who are unemployed, who are disabled, who maybe English isn't the first language. And that's a way that we can utilise that technology. But our aspiration is really to enable participation and influence decision-making online. We are going to continue to experience difficulties when it comes to setting budgets and how do we channel that to the right people, and making sure that we are focused on outcomes. So I think in terms of technology, yes, there are lots of risks. We've got to be very careful that we are not excluding people just because we use technology. So it should never be seen as one or the other, and should very much complement, you know, normal online, offline work that we do. But I think it is important in terms of being an elected official as well that we embrace this cultural change. I mean, it's often the case that I find that my interactions with constituents are all mainly through digital means, as opposed to the old methods where you sat in a library and waited for people to come and visit you and ask you questions. So I do think that there is mechanisms that we can use to really get people involved, to help set agendas, to help set our priorities as a local government, and to help make that difference within our local communities. Thank you.
Okay, un aplauso, ¿no? Un aplauso. Thank you, Jen. We will talk later. Okay, now the three speakers will have their speech, and then we will have an open type table, okay, for talking with the people. So now let me introduce Carlos. ¿Tienes preparado?
I don't know. Is my presentation ready?
So we can wait, and we can go to. A ver, aquí va després Arnau, no? Ho tens preparat? Vale, so Arnau Mata, let me introduce Arnau, is since 2015 he's councillor and city council spokesman in Sant Vicenç dels Horts, his hometown. He's in charge of several departments which are much related: communication, citizen participation, and IT systems. Nowadays, people are demanding institutions to share decision-making power, and they don't resign to just vote every 4 years in elections. And technology has a lot to do in this process of democratizing policy making and bringing people closer to collective issues. To share some of these views, he participated in the Electronic Identity Forum, known as the eID Forum, last September in Tallinn, in Estonia. Arnau was born in 1992. Barcelona Olympiadas. He's currently completing studies of political University of Catalonia, la UOC, and he has been for many years volunteer in Scouts group and other local associations. And so are now 10 minutes, okay? Thank you.
So good morning. I don't know if my presentation is ready. I had a couple of photos to present. Okay, so let's start. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate and to explain our experience in Sant Vicenç dels Horts. I will explain the case of Sant Vicenç dels Horts as a municipality where we put participation and technology working together in order to promote and strengthen democratic values. Let's start from the framework. Yes, okay. Sant Vicenç is a town of 30,000 inhabitants, very close to Barcelona. As many other towns in the area, Sant Vicenç has a diverse population due to several immigration movements in our recent past. We have a high percentage of elderly people, and also as a working town, we were strongly affected by the economic crisis rate, around 24% in 2014. Nowadays, as you know, the situation is much better, but since only 9% of population have university studies, lots of people could lose their jobs again if another crisis arrived. Moreover, the general context of corruption cases affecting the public institutions, all the public institutions, has brought distrust to the administration, whatever the level. Despite that, San Vicente is a dynamic town full of economic initiatives and of social and cultural activity. People have open nature and like to take part in collective issues of the town. Because of all I've explained, the city council government decided a few years ago to change administration. We believe it's better to incorporate people's point of view in our policies instead of taking decisions from an office, which in most cases are far from reality and from people's needs. Because who can take better decisions for citizens' future than citizens for themselves? That's how we started several participatory processes to engage people in many areas of decision-making, from strategic planification to urban design of public spaces and participatory budgeting in specific neighborhoods. And to do it, we make no difference between the institution and the citizens or associations. We are at the same level. From the beginning of each process, make decisions together. Even when we define the rules of a participatory process, we do it in a citizen commission. And here in this picture, you can see Mayor Maite Marik with a citizen explain participatory process. That's an example of that. Most of these processes have a proposal stage when people can submit ideas, and a voting stage when people can prioritize specific proposals among others. And for that, we decided to create an online platform. Here it is, which name is Decidim San Vicente, or in English, We Decide San Vicente. But why we decided to go digital? Well, digital participation and voting offers a lot of advantages. Improves communication with citizens, reduces the costs of mobilization, helps some groups which are not used to participate in ordinary meetings because of time, because of the habit, provides transparency and democratic guarantees, allows monitoring of the processes, and makes the difference. But for us, it's not enough to create a website and let people vote there. We need to commit citizens to vote. We need people to trust that voting is useful to change issues that affect their daily lives. And that's why face-to-face work is still needed. As far as we are concerned, combining online and offline strategies has a direct impact in the results of a participatory process. The clearest example is the voting points we put on the streets in order to encourage and help people voting. This way, we can solve any doubt at the moment, and people can check how the system works. And the authentication process is easier than voting from home because we create per-user codes in the platform that later we give to people who come to vote at the voting point. No email, no phone number are needed, only an ID card. The system checks in real time if the person is in the census and if he has already voted or not. It would be much more difficult with paper ballots. Instead, e-voting allows this multi-platform voting with the highest security and privacy standards. The average participation in this type of processes is 3% in our country in the last years. But last year, we applied our methodology to a participatory budgeting process to invest 200,000 euros in a neighborhood of 2,000 inhabitants. We got an 8% of voting. This year, we have done the same in another neighborhood of 5,000 inhabitants. We have registered the 12% of voting. That's nearly 10 points above the average. It's not easy at all. This is a double revolution. Change the way of doing politics and do it using technological tools. It will take time. It would be a long process. But in our case, we've started working and we won't stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnau. Is Carles Agustí presentation it's already? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, so let me introduce Carles. Carles Agustí Hernández is an expert in international relations, open government and transparency, and open data and new governance models. He's international speaker about these issues. He's nominated by World CSR organization as one of 50 best experts in smart cities at world level. He and his team launched Barcelona Open Government, governobert.barcelona.cat, and achieved that Barcelona meet 100% of international transparent criteria. He's now Open Government Director at Diputació de Barcelona and President of Compolcat. Recently, he was Innovation and Democratic Quality Director of Catalan Government, and he's former Councillor of Citizen Participation and Association of Barcelona City Council. He had been General Director of Interdepartmental Affairs in the Department of the Presidency of Catalan Government, and he's graduate in Politics and Sociology with studies of history, and he's visiting professor of different universities also. So, Carles, if you want.
Thank you. Thank you, Director and Minister, to organize this seminar. In this seminar, you ask about technology, if it's an opportunity or a threat for democracy and for our lives. For me, it's an opportunity. So quick. For me, it's an opportunity, clearly an opportunity. I answer clearly. I try to explain it based in my field of experience, that is open government. First of all, a little bit of context. We live in a political crisis context based in distrust and distance, like this picture, between citizens and politicians, or better expressed, political wall, in which people put politicians, parties, public servants, governments, all mixed. What changed these years? Changed a lot of things, of course. But in communication field, especially, change this from bottom paradigm of your slide to down paradigm. What change? Who have the power of information? Why change? Because of technological revolution? I think not at all. Sure that technological revolution accelerate the change, but it's not the only reason. I'm sure that this change would have occurred equally, but maybe slowly. Years ago, who have the information was only governments, like in up paradigm, that can planify how to communicate with time. Now, with new technology tools, information change of site, and now citizens, in a few minutes, have the information. This fact change all, and we have to adapt to it. It's an opportunity. I think, yes, it is, because we have now more informed citizens, more involved, but we have to adapt to it. Open government, my field of experience, is composed by three main fields: open data, transparency, and citizen participation. One possible definition is this. I remark 3 points in this definition. of course, is the unification into a single strategy of transparency, field, citizen participation, and open data. But I remark three words. Transversally. Is transversally or not is? All the government have to believe in it. If only one part of the government applies it, you don't change the government policies, the government way to relation with citizens. Second sentence is not only a web page. It's not open government to build a web page that with the title open government and nothing else inside. You have to work the back office, obviously, and the content of this web page. And third thing I refer afterwards is cultural change. I'm going to analyze briefly if it's an opportunity or a threat in every field of open government. In open data, I think it's not only an opportunity. Open data, all the world of data, big data, doesn't exist directly without technology, simply. Data is a son of technology, so obviously is an opportunity here. In a transparency field, in a practical level, transparency is to show data. What are we doing in governments and public administrations? How to show it, it's really easier through or with technology. Finally, in the field of citizen participation, better participation is always and will be presential participation, the face-to-face between governments and citizens. But technology allows you to arrive, obviously, to much more people. How can you do participation with citizens, with cities or countries with thousands or 100,000 or million inhabitants without technology? So technology is an opportunity. A quick view about the opportunity or threat in the different citizen participation channels. The association channel, this change a little with technology. They come, they participate equally. Maybe, of course, you improve the ways of communication, but essentially this channel associations don't change. What about presential participation? Better participation, I repeat. You improve the ways to call together the meeting, but more or less came the same people and not change a lot. But appears a new possibility to arrive to almost all population and to allow that all citizens communicate with you, with governments, with politicians, the e-participation, the electronic participation. This is a main change, and this is the opportunity of technology in participation field. And what happened with the fourth channel, the other citizens? Normally, are citizens older and with poverty situation, so less connection to internet than others. So with technology, we can achieve tools to improve this relation, but not change deeply this field of citizen participation. The tools and programs that provide technology improve a lot the channels and possibilities of citizens to opine and participate, I think, as a summary. We are going in one sentence of the open government definition. I remark, as before, the words cultural change. So, attitude. Technology is a tool that improves an opportunity, but is only a tool. We have to put attitude, belief in it, to improve really our democracy. A little bit quick view in the three fields again. In open data, Gollum. I think that you know this character about Lord of the Rings. What says this guy? My treasure. This is the old mentality considered as a property, the data that we receive, and we save us in our computer. The change of mentality is just the opposite. We must open all data that we receive, except obviously few ones for security or confidentiality reasons. What about transparency? An example of attitude. Imagine all that this room is made of glass. Because of transparency law, we are in a public office, in a public administration, and this room is made of glass. Citizens could see us. A change, a very important change, from not to see us. But if we are doing the same inside, we are not changing anything. They can see us, but we don't change anything. It's not enough accomplishing transparency laws. We must to be. Finally, in citizen participation, the attitude is obvious: to listen people, to listen citizens. For politicians, but also public servants, have to change the mentality in order to listen people, listen citizens, internalize their demands, and obviously answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Carles. And the last one, but not the less important. Jordi Puiggalí, Head of Research and Security Department at CITEL. Jordi Puiggalí is heading CITEL Research and Development Department since the formation of the company in 2001. He has been instrumental in the development of CITEL technology and intellectual property, co-authoring numerous international patents on application-level cryptography and e-voting security. Prior to joining CITEL, Jordi Puiggalí was the technical director for PKIE and security projects of the IT department of the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. As a security expert, he participated as a speaker in numerous international conferences on computer security and applied cryptography on e-voting and election modernization. Currently, he is also assistant professor at the UOC, Universitat Oberta de Catalunya. Jordi, si vols aixecar, t'aixeques, tu mateix. He said that he prefers to do it just standing.
I think that is better because you can see me in the screen. Okay, I have a presentation. One moment. Okay. So now in the presentation, I think that we listened the good part of the eDemocracy electronic voting technology, but there is also a part that is the main concern about that is delaying or sometimes is not allowing to introduce in electronic voting, that is security. That is one of the main arguments that is used by people that don't want to introduce new technologies on the democracy. And the presentation that I'm going to do now, it's more related about this, about which are the main concerns of electronic voting. Starting first about what the people say, why electronic voting people think that is not secure. If we look for in internet about what the people think about, you see a lot of news about experts saying that internet is not secure. So you see that people say that you can hack the voting system, you can change the elections, and mainly all these concerns are related about the internet voting channel. But it's only internet voting secure. If you make the same exercise, but in other channels, so like traditional channels, you can see also examples about attacks that are happening in traditional elections. And especially now that the technology is more accessible for attackers, you can also see that technology is used for attacking traditional elections. There are examples, for instance, if you go to in Canada in 2011, people program a call center and start to call then the different, a list of affiliates to a specific party, redirecting them to a different polling station the day before the election. And suddenly all these people, when they go to vote to the polling station, they see that they are not in the list. So some of them were not able to vote because they arrived to the incorrect place. And recently also, there are a lot of noise about spreading fake news or just to influence the voters about to vote to a specific candidate or not. So at the end, if we just see security, if internet voting is secure, only focus on the voting channel, we'll see that there are not secure channels. You cannot decide, okay, this channel is insecure, then don't use voting, because otherwise then you realize that you cannot vote anywhere. So what makes an election secure is not the voting channel, are the security measures that you are implementing. And this is one of the important parts that we are managing. So usually in tradition, well, I'm advancing things because then I will go through the slides faster. But the first introduction of my slides is this one: how we are managing the security in elections. It doesn't matter if it's electronic based or based on traditional on traditional channels. In traditional channels, the security measures are mainly based on physical measure or procedural measures. We are putting the votes inside envelopes. We want to protect the privacy of the voters. And we have, for instance, observers and independent auditors that are checking, that are surveying everything that is happening in an election to ensure that nobody is manipulating anything. In the case of electronic voting, then we need to add an additional layer. In addition to physical and procedural measures, also technical measures. And here is where, from the technical point of view, is where cryptographic protocols are then providing these additional measures that are needed in technology. In this case, these cryptographic protocols are mainly focused on providing two things. In one hand, the privacy and the integrity protection of the votes. That is the first things that were governments introducing when they introduced electronic voting. But now they are also providing measures to allow the auditability of the elections. Okay, I think that, yeah, I have the presentation there. Perfect. So just to be, okay, so this is the first part about security on electronic voting. So these are examples. For instance, if you look for internet, you see a lot of news reports saying that don't use internet voting because it's not secure. But what I'd say before, doing the same exercise on traditional elections, you see also news about problems on electronic voting, on traditional voting, especially on postal voting. And some examples, I talk about what happens in Canada, but also if you check what happens in postal voting, you see that there are cases about that the votes are not arriving on time. And one example is what happened in one of the pilots that we work here on the Generalitat in 2003. We are talking years ago, but in this case, about 80% of the votes coming from Mexico were lost because problems on the postal service. But in parallel, they were making a pilot of internet voting and all the votes arrived. So there were some problems also on traditional voting that can be solved on using electronic means. So then we need to focus not on the security of the voting channel, but on which security measures are implemented to ensure that the voting process is secure. So then, going on the measures that are implemented on electronic voting and focus on privacy and integrity using cryptographic protocols. Why is important cryptographic protocol? Because if we think about in a traditional election, in a remote election, voters are casting votes from their homes. And in this case, what is important is that the cryptographic measures are implemented in the same voter computer. Why? Because at the end, when we are sending the vote, this vote is sent through a channel that is not controlled by anybody. So if there is any attack in this channel, even if we are using SSL connections or encrypted channels, the problem is that the vote arrives to the server and then it's open to any other attacks in the server. This is not something new. In postal voting happens the same. We are delegating the security to the postal service. We don't know what is happening there. So in our case, in the case of cryptographic protocols, all the measures are implemented in the same voter computer. It's like putting the vote of the voter inside a safe, so it cannot be opened until the vote arrive to the Electoral Commission, to the Electoral Board, and the Electoral Board then use the key, open this safe, and recover the vote. So one of the things that is used for cryptographic protocols is to ensure this end-to-end encryption and digital signature of the vote. But is this enough? No, because another important thing is how we are decrypting and counting the votes in an anonymous way. One of the side effects of using cryptography is that all the votes at the end are a representation of ones and zeros. So it's like a number. And the problem is that when you encrypt something, then these ciphertexts become unique for each voter. Even if two voters are casting a vote for the same candidate, they will have a different numerical representation of the vote. And this is equivalent to give to the voters like envelopes with different colors. If you know that my vote has the yellow envelope, then it doesn't matter that you are counting the votes, shuffling the votes in the ballot box. When you see the yellow color and then you open the envelope, you will see that this is my vote. So we can break privacy. So also it's important to use anonymous mechanisms like mixnets that are shuffling, re-encrypting, so like changing the color of the envelopes. So when the envelopes are open, it's impossible to correlate this envelope to the original voters. So this is another aspect that is important where cryptographic protocols are used, because standard security measures, even if you store the votes in a random way inside the database, the color of the envelope defines who is the voter. And this is one of the processes that are implemented by cryptographic protocols. From the point of view of auditability, this is a very important aspect, not only on electronic voting, but even in a traditional election, because the security of an election also requires, that we have observers that are checking that who is managing the election is not manipulating anything and is changing the results. So in a traditional election, everything is based on tangible means. You have paper envelopes. Everybody can observe by the eyes, by human means, what is happening. But when we move to an electronic voting system, what happens is everything is happening in a logical dimension. Everything happens inside computers. How can I audit what is happening inside the computer? If there is any bug inside the computer, or someone is managing the computer, can change what I'm voting. Even if I saw in my screen that I vote for one candidate, what is stored in the database could be another thing. So here it's important that these cryptographic protocols are providing measures that allows to audit these processes, something that you cannot do by human means. Then you need to do it in another way. And cryptography allows to do this in a mathematical way. So an example is what happens during the counting process, okay? One way for auditing elections, electronic elections using these cryptographic protocols is, in one side, we can publish the encrypted votes in a public way, so everybody knows, okay, this is the valid list of votes that are going to be counted. Of course, these votes needs to be encrypted. And when we are shuffling and mixing the votes, and then this process is generating mathematical proof. And this mathematical proof shows that even we have now a different set of votes that are encrypted, that you don't know if they are the original votes. Then using mathematical operations, then you can check that the contents are still the same. It's like you can multiply 2 plus 3, you have 6. And even if you shuffle several times and you change the order, if you now multiply 3 plus 2, you still have 6. So what we need to see is that it doesn't matter the order, because the contents are still the same. And the same happens when the votes are decrypted. We need to provide means that nobody is, for instance, manipulating the votes. And if I say, okay, inside this envelope, there is this candidate 1, is really the candidate 1 that is inside the envelope, and nobody is manipulating the election. And all these things are mathematical proof that can be given by these cryptographic protocols. So then an audit process consists now on implementing mathematical operations that are public, that everybody knows, and then cannot be manipulated. So then observers can take the proof that are given for the from the different parts of the systems. They can perform these mathematical operations and then can check if the value or the results of these mathematical operations are correct. And this is the way. It's a different way for auditing elections. It's not a way based on human means, but it's a way based on mathematical formulas that cannot be manipulated. So in case that there is any manipulation, then it is possible to see if the election is correct. And just to finish, from an international point of view, how can the different governments introduce internet voting? Starting at the beginning of 2000, then the first the government start implementing or focusing more on privacy and integrity measures. So until then, Neuchâtel was one of the first in Switzerland of the first governments introducing electronic voting in the higher level that is also providing an anonymity on the votes. But then other governments, starting from Norway, then start to introduce also audit means based on cryptographic protocols. And other governments now also are introducing or using these cryptographic means. And now it's Switzerland who is now pioneering all the new requirements for security on electronic voting. One I put there, it's still, let's say, open because there are not processes that or proposal, cryptographic proposals that are solving this, but it's closed. That is how to provide long-term privacy. And that means that how can we protect even privacy in front of quantum computers. So, and this is more or less the landscape nowadays of this, how these governments are introducing. Well, if you have any questions, we participate on on all of this. but the idea is that the focus is also to provide the same transparency as any ballot box, but on computers. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Jordi. Jennifer, are you still here? Jenny? I don't know if she's
yes,
here.
I'm still here. I'm still here.
Yeah, okay. So now we will have just 20 minutes for talking with people here in the meeting. So if someone wants to do some question, I have two questions. Okay, perfect. Jennifer, we will do the question or in Catalan or in English, but it will be also translate, okay, for you? Vale.
English. Hello. It's a two-part question. Firstly, in your system of mixing, why didn't you use like ring signatures or aggregate keys or anonymous credentials? And also, I'm interested if you guys are following the research. Yeah, hello. Yeah, there's like a lot of research happening now around like smart contracts and zero knowledge proof. And there's like a really big community of people developing systems for voting and digital governance in Barcelona. And I also the people connected to the city hall and the city council, like Decidim, but they're like two separate groups that have completely separate meetings. And the group of people they're doing, which is around cryptocurrency and decentralized technologies and free software. There's a lot of really interesting ideas I didn't see talk about here today, like about smart contracts and zero knowledge proofs, and even how we like make the technical proposals. I think there's like a lot of room for improvement. But then the thing that they're lacking is applying it in the real world socially. So they come up with all these very interesting techniques or ideas, but they don't get a lot of feedback about how they're used in the real world. So I was just interested to know about how we can try and bring these communities together, and also if you guys are actually looking into zero knowledge proofs and smart contracts and so on. Thanks.
Well, I think that is more a technical question, but starting with blind signatures, okay, we know that is one of the ways for using anonymity, but it's a way for providing anonymity if you trust two entities. The problem is that all the digital certificate that is used for digitally signing the votes is always the same. So if you follow all the research, I'm on the research on internet voting since 2001. Blind signatures is something that nowadays is not used because you need to trust the entity that is digitally signing. So it's possible that this entity can enter a lot of votes. From the point of view of blockchain, smart contracts, I was recently also in the eVote AD. There was a panel talking about blockchain. And what is clear that everybody agrees is that blockchain can provide integrity, but cannot provide privacy. So it can be a layer that you can use for casting votes, but for instance, blockchain cannot ensure if the vote that is stored in the blockchain really contains the selections made by the voter. And this is something that you need cryptographic protocols for do it.
Do you know
and
George
smart
Denisis?
Sorry?
Do you know George Denisis from UCL? He have a paper called Coconut, Selective Disclosure, Unlinkable. And you can, instead of having it signed by one group, it can be a distributed group of people.
Yeah, but this paper, if I'm not wrong, is used for a small group of people. If you want to apply this, for instance, on a traditional election with millions of voters, doesn't work.
No, it could work.
Well, we can. This is theory. When I will see in the practice, then because it's what I say. From my point of view, blockchain is like a place that you can put things. The smart contracts are public and are shared with everybody. If you want to perform a cryptographic operation, you need to get access to a private key, and you are not going to put the private key in a blockchain. You still need cryptographic protocols that need to run on top of the blockchain. So blockchain at the end, it's, let's say, another component, another layer that you want to add, but it's not solving most of the main problems of any election, like privacy, integrity, or verifiability.
Thank you, George. It was my question. I wanted to talk about blockchain, so you answered me. Is there any more question here for help asking to him? Maria, your turn.
Thank you. So I certainly think that technology is an opportunity, like to all this change and for eDemocracy and everything. But we've seen, right, an example, a success case from San Vicente del Sort, and also with all the technology which is actually enabling all these processes. But sometimes I have the feeling that society, we are still as citizens not prepared or not confident enough on technology and with all these processes. So do you think there should also be policies and initiatives to also help us citizens trust in technology in order to make it a real opportunity and not a threat?
Yes. For example, we as Diputació, one of the programs of our open government program, Diva Oberta, is a service of electronic vote for municipalities. We provide the company, we provide financing, but we help them to do all the process. We not only pay and anything else. We go to the municipality, we help them, and it's very, very important that interact with citizens in all the previous process of electronic vote, and teaching them about and showing, for example, the interiority of the process. Is another way of cultural change to achieve the confidence of the people in these systems. You have to work in it, sure.
Well, I agree with you that we have still a lot of work to do in pedagogic and educate people to e-voting, as many other countries have done. For example, Switzerland and Estonia, countries that have a lot of experience, a lot of years of experience in e-voting. And I think, as I said before, that the best way to make people trust the system is show people that it works at the moment that you vote. And for us, it has been very important to organize these voting points in the streets, because this way people see how it works and people see that it's secure.
Jennifer, would you like to say something about that?
Yes, I think I would agree that, we, in terms of what some of the things we do, we put lots of funding for our participatory budgeting, for example, into capacity building and teaching people digital skills. And I think that that's a really important way to help be able to build that into the communities. So I think, you've got to be aware that there are people who are not prepared, who may not have access, but providing the infrastructure and providing training is a key part of being able to help citizens participate.
Okay, thank you. Any more question? No? Ok. Us vull agrair doncs, tots la presència per ser avui aquí. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here today. We are now finishing the first panel. Agrair doncs, als directors generals, secretaris, diputats que han vingut també, evidentment, en aquest acte, i a tota la gent que ha vingut de fora de Barcelona, perquè amb el dia d'ahir és difícil. Si us sembla, farem ara un petit break de 15 minuts, així podeu anar a fer un cafè o el que convingueu, i quedem d'aquí 20 minuts aquí, a 11:45, 11:35, d'acord? Vinga, fins ara.
with the second panel now of the session, Technology and Opportunity or a Threat to Democracy. My name is Albert Royo, I'm the Director of Public Affairs of Gov2U. And we have with us Mrs. Simona Levy. She is the founder of XNet. Mr. Robert Bjarnason, he's CEO and co-founder of Citizens Foundation and just landed from Iceland. And we also have Mr. Artur Serra, Deputy Director of I2CAT Foundation from Barcelona. And we'll start with our speaker, who is based in Estonia, Mr. Robert Krimer. He's professor of e-governance in the Tallinn University of Technology within the Ragnar Nurska Department of Innovation and Governance. Robert, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, let me just introduce you and your profile a little bit. Robert's research is focused on electronic participation and democracy, as well as e-voting, the transformation of the public sector, and all issues further developing a digital society. Robert Krimer, Dr. Krimer is also associate editor of the international scientific journal Government Information Quarterly, where he is in charge of participation process and participation issues. Robert coordinates the TOOP, the EU Horizon 2020 large-scale pilot on exploring and demonstrating the feasibility of the once-only principle involving more than 50 partners from 21 countries inside and outside the European Union. Further to this, he was member of the group of experts of the Council of Europe ad hoc committee on electronic voting, which will soon release its updated recommendation on legal, technical, and operational standards for electronic voting. And also he was one of the lead experts for the Council of Europe ad hoc committee on electronic democracy, and who drafted the Annex 1 of the Council of Europe recommendation on eDemocracy in the year 2009. Dr. Krimer, he will offer a presentation on why voting technology is used and how it affects democracy. So it's somehow linked to the presentation of Dr. Puiggali of the previous panel. So Dr. Krimer, the floor is yours.
Okay, so let me see if I manage to start my presentation. Okay, now it's gone. Okay, I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, we see it.
Ah, okay, good, but I don't see it. Okay, good. Yeah, there I have to. Okay, so basically, and how do I go forward? Up here. Okay, sorry. So basically, what I will be talking about is electronic voting and the relationship with eDemocracy overall. What we can see is that electronic voting as a concept has been discussed basically since the availability of electricity, right? So we can say it's almost 160 years, and I will come to that in a bit. But what we can see today is that all around the world, there are countries discussing using various forms of electronic voting, may that be scanners, may that be voting machines, or in particular, what we are interested in, internet voting. And our countries that you can see on that map that are dark green. There is actually to date only one country in the world that has introduced electronic voting via the internet in any election. So in every election for every citizen, and that is Estonia. All other countries have introduced it either partially or only for certain regions, or only up to a limit like in Switzerland. And so that it's the only country with this universal adoption. Estonia is a very tiny country. It is only 1.3 million inhabitants. Still, it is really a forerunner in using digital. As such, one could assume that it also has developed a quite sophisticated eDemocracy, but that is not the case so far. But why do we have some movements around eDemocracy? It's because there's a decreasing voter turnout, because there is an increasing distance between the rulers and the ruled, so basically the politicians and the citizens. And we have a growing mobility, a globalization that is taking on, and what we're doing just now is a very good example that we actually already communicate via teleconference and still get together from all around the world. So there is a need also to provide democracy with this potential. So what we could have is that we have more and different social interaction, that we have participation from very remote places and with people that we hardly know. And it actually also challenges the paradigm of representation per se, because it could be that we are even voting constantly, right? So that we don't even need politicians anymore. And so we could be also a way to bring in the citizens that are not engaging anymore. Nevertheless, politicians so far have not been very active in supporting eDemocracy beyond marketing speech. And so the ideal that we could see is this constant dialogue between representatives and citizens. So if we could develop 3 scenarios, we could think of at least a thin democracy where we only have information that is provided to citizens, a strong democracy where there's constant feedback and consultation between politicians and citizens, or even the point where we could say it's a quick democracy where citizens have to vote every day on all the political issues at stake. So that could be one of the 3 scenarios. So e-voting as such plays an important role because, as Kofi Annan said at one point, democracy is not only about elections, but it's certainly not less. And so voting really is a core social process for us to participate in decision making. And so there is no, I would say, democracy that without voting as such, right? And so it is really core. And in voting, and now that brings me to our topic, we cannot do it without technology, because if we would do it without technology, we would have to do things like division, a show of hands, a strength of our voice. We would have to ask the citizens for their vote. Actually, it would never be secret, right? We need technology in order to preserve secrecy of voting, whether that is really very simple technologies such as voting tokens with stones, metal pieces, marbles, swords, as has been still used up until recently up in Selina in Switzerland, or when we have those pebbles that are still used in Ghana for voting. They can be considered really our voting tokens. And we have unstructured ballots, really broken pottery pieces, palm leaves, paper, where you basically have write-in votes. Or we have structured ballots such as wax tablets or Australian ballot as we know it today. So that technology that we think about, and we had early voting machines already proposed in 1830s and 1850s when really electricity came about. And all big inventors at the time, whether that is Thomas Edison, Werner von Siemens, Carl Erickson, they've all started or proposed voting machines for parliaments using electricity around that time. And none of them was successful. Actually, the success only came earliest in 1932 when the Parliament of Finland for the first time introduced an electrified voting system, actually from Carl Erickson. So they wanted to show that they're better than the Swedish. Actually, a motive that is very strong when it comes to using voting technology. So in the 1950s, for the first time, we actually see voting technologies such as optical scanning machines, respectively, punch cards being used in public elections in the US. And that is even the one thing that caused in 2000 our Florida 2000 debacle. The electric voting machines, as I mentioned already, were proposed by Martin de Brett, by Thomas Edison in 1859, Werner von Siemens 1872, and the first actual use then in the 1970s, respectively 1930s for the parliament. The latest innovation as such, as I said, internet voting, and here Estonia really has a clear leading role, and you see this important factor for elections in Estonia, that is the electronic ID that is put in the card reader here on this picture. And that is really instrumental for internet voting. It started out with 2% of voters in 2005, and today it has over 30% of voters today. But what are the reasons why e-voting is being used? And I analyze that looking at the 4 stakeholder groups. On the one hand side, the election administrators, then looking at the voters, looking at politicians, and then also looking at the vendors, respectively inventors. And let's go through them a bit. Yeah. So for administrators, it's very often important to conduct a good election, right? So to combat fraud, to make sure that you can count the votes more accurately and quicker, that you can actually establish trust in the election administration, that you have more central control, that you can maintain or raise the voter turnout. This is an important feature for them, to be more efficient and effective in organizing the elections, to reduce the costs, because of course that's for them interesting. And what they also always see is to preserve the voter from doing something wrong, right? So to reduce the unintentionally spoiled ballots because of human error, because they cannot use the ballots in the right way. When we look at the voter side, for them using e-voting mainly is about helping to be independent from the help of third parties, meaning blind people, handicapped people. It can be a way for them really to overcome a barrier and to vote independently and to participate in an election despite living outside or very far away from the next polling station. Yeah, so really convenience is the main motive for voters. If we look at politicians, for them really it is to show a first mover advantage, right? We had that in the case of Finland, we had that in the case of Estonia, really to show we are a modern democracy because we use technology and we're better than the rest. And the one thing that is never really put forward when it comes to politicians, or not put forward openly, is really that they are interested in a change of the election results due to different chances of being elected, right? So when you do electoral reform, it of course also changes the chances of being elected, re-elected, and that is one of the reasons why sometimes it is brought forward in the discussion by politicians. And last but not least, of course, the vendors and inventors, it's for them to see the technology being used and, of course, to sell it, right? I mean, there is a monetary incentive, of course, which is only natural. Okay, so those are the main reasons for using electronic voting. And let me summarize my intervention briefly. With eDemocracy, we see a transformation of democracy that challenges representation, but actually what we should aim for is really more participation possibilities. But we need to see how we can actually develop them in a way so that the voters want it. E-voting has evolved because it was possible, right? It's over 160 years ago that the first ideas emerged, and whenever the technology was available, it was used for elections. And elections are a prime target for using technology from the very beginning. And without technology, we cannot have secret elections. It's just a question how we use the technology in the best way. So why do we use e-voting? It's because it is designed for more accurate and less fraudulent elections. But the primary difference of what internet voting can do best is really to enable voters to participate from distance and to provide convenience to the citizens in participating in the elections. And that are, according to my research, the reasons why we look into electronic voting, or irrespectively of the problems which exist, of course. And with that, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Robert. Now we move to Mrs. Simona Levy, next to me. Simona is a theater director, playwright, technopolitical strategist, curator, multidisciplinary artist, researcher, and teacher, who as an activist has focused in recent years on free culture, digital democracy, and the strategic use of digital tools for organization, technopolitical communication, collective action, the struggle against state corruption, and for the renovation of democracy. She's the founder of projects like XNet and 15M Parrato, which led to the trial of the chief executives of Bankia, ranked as the 5th bank in Spain. She organizes platforms in order to bring corruption to light and to unmask those who are politically responsible for the economic injustices in Spain and in Europe. I would also mention, last but not least, that last year Rolling Stone magazine chose Simona Levi as one of the 25 people in the world who are shaping the future. So we are really happy to have her with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay. So, good morning. My presentation will be held in creative English. So please, if you don't understand what I'm saying, please just tell me straight away. So first of all, I want also to ask the question if technology is an opportunity or a threat for democracy, and I want to answer it very strongly. Technology is always an opportunity, and as was said here by the Minister Puigneró and Director Barbagna and many other participants. And the threat to democracy is, of course, not the technology in itself, but the human use of it, and in particular how governments and big corporations use it. I strongly believe that democracy is not only, but mainly the future of democracy should be the surveillance, the citizen surveillance on their institution and on the corporation that have an impact on the general interest. And since always legislation and governance go together with narrative, this is why for me it's very important that this answer is responded very strongly. This idea of the technology as a threat is a threat in itself for democracy. And this is not the first time that this idea of the technology in the hand of the citizen is a threat as a narrative in order to have a government that they are in fact repressive for the civil society. So we know that when a system decides that something is dangerous, this means that sooner or later the citizen will not be able to access it freely. I believe, as I say, in democracy with the idea of demo very clearly. We cannot have a democracy without an empowered civil society. And I believe that democracy is a relation of co-responsibility between demo, an empowered demo, and the institution. And I don't believe in the trust of the institution. I don't think we should imagine this idea of democracy as, oh, we must trust our institution. I think it's a wrong idea in itself, because in every contract is not only a matter of trust, it's a matter of seeing the result. I want to remember the democide, which is the killing of the people by their own government, is the main cause of unnatural death in the 20th centuries, much more above war. And I think in Catalonia, with the repression that suffered the Catalonia, it's pretty clear. And it's also pretty clear that we cannot trust government. It cannot be the base of a politic, the trust in the government. The base of democracy should be the empowerment of the civil society and the government. And we have to think the government as a service, not as something we must trust like an icon. So this technology, the internet in the digital era, give us a lot of tools to achieve this empowerment and the democracy as I meant it. And with an idea of not a direct democracy, I think it's a bit old-fashioned, the idea of direct democracy, because direct democracy is always an idea of this government above, and then this horizontal participation, which is not a very competent participation. I think we should now ask for a distributed governance, this idea of the distributed competence in the civil society, together with the government, that make possible the advances that we do as a civil society. I think that so that we must defend the technology, not just use it. And since also this this session today is in order to open this project from the government of Catalonia of a charter of digital rights and duties, which I think the idea of rights and duties is exactly very, very important. So I brought here 5 things that I will bring. I've been invited as a civil society to be part of this chart. So this is 5 of the main basic, because there is many other things, but we have no time to speak about everything, but 5 basic things that I think are important for a government to understand and to receive from the civil society and to work together in order to have a really a democracy of the future. And my perspective is, of course, the idea of transparency for the institution and privacy for the people. I think another part of the wrong idea of populism and of the wrong participation that is demagogically served to us many times from many institutions is this idea. The transparency and the participation have to be a tool to change the unbalance between the power of the institution and the lack of power of the people. So we cannot imagine the same transparency for the single people as the transparency we must ask to institution. And also the participation. We like to participate. I think we'll talk about this after me. We want tools for participation because we don't want to participate. We want an efficient institution, and we want a tool for participation in order to improve our institution, not because we believe in this fake horizontal participation. We are already, as human beings, participation in our daily life and in our whatever, wherever we move, in our family or in our work or in our inspiration. So we are already participating as a civil society. I don't want to be patronized by the institution telling me that I should participate more. So these 5 things I want to bring is, first of all, as I said, we should defend the technology and not just use it. So the first of all, naturally, is the net neutrality. The net neutrality is a collective responsibility. We know that there is a lot of policy against the net neutrality. We have a big threat now from the United States, so we can understand is a big threat to net neutrality. And so what we must succeed together with the institution is regulation which respect the net neutrality, which means that we have to defend an internet as a non-discriminatory public services, and we have to introduce contractual obligation in the administration that include strong non-discriminatory clauses, and must promote and offer tools to follow up and report when there is practice against the net neutrality. You know that net neutrality means that the internet is neutral for everybody who is acceding or receiving from the internet have the same power in the internet. The second things I think we must defend is the democracy to correct and democracy and privacy to correct the asymmetric proportion between the power that being and citizen, not only governments but also institutions that impact on the general interest. So we have in this area we must defend the anonymity and encryption to protect privacy and freedoms as the inviolability of the communication in the era of mass surveillance. We know that there is a lot of politics against the encryption, and this is very medieval for me because, for example, in 1600, the last thing that the Council of Barcelona asked was the inviolability of communication. This is something civil society asked for centuries, and now that someone discussed that we cannot protect our own communication, is really anti-democratic and open the door to democide. So in the same area is the real protection on whistleblowers, the fact that we can be protected when we have to denounce a wrongdoing. Now we have the tools. We as XNet, we have introduced a leaking box with strict anonymity for the sources. The Generalitat of Catalunya is now implementing it in many other areas. We are kind of a pioneer in this sense, this relation between civil society and institution, and I think it's a model that have to be followed. And the respect of the general data protection regulation, especially regarding the relationship between user and citizen. As you know, the new general data protection ruling is saying that we cannot be asked all the time our data while the institution or the corporation is not giving our data. So now we are fighting in order that when we ask an information, a public information to institution or company, we shouldn't be asked and put in a list of who are you, why you ask that, et cetera, because this is the future Stasi system, right? Third thing is to oppose the arbitrary algorithmic governance, and you know probably that there is a directive in Europe that is introducing, with the excuse of the copyright and the excuse of piracy, is introducing the fact that the private internet provider have to introduce filter in order to correct our freedom of expression. This is the door open to algorithmic governance and against a new control on the civil society. We must oppose, we must ask the institution to open the data in order that they are public and possible to be used by all of us, but we must be strict on the fact that we cannot accept algorithmic governance unless that this algorithmic governance is held by private companies, private corporation. So the fourth point is the slogan we use is public money must be public code. So there is a lot of innovation around and this idea of copyright and patent. So there is a lot of public money that is used to develop contents and innovation, and often is privatized. So we need a strong policies on public domain. In general, a public domain. And the last thing that we're gonna ask and defend is something that strongly comes from the civil society, which is the attribution of civil society and sources. This is, I link it very strongly to the digital and the internet era, because the free culture and the internet in itself is founded on the fact that we must recognize the strong participation of all the participation of the community. I am 30 years activist, and one of the more difficult things we have to succeed is when we the people are recognized as the agent of innovation and transformation. And this is very important, because democracy should be the recognition about this important role of the civil society in the improvement of the institution. And when the institution only recognize between themselves, they are lacking of transparency and they are lacking of respect for democracy and for the work of the civil society. So this means also that we want to be a part of the legislative process. So for me, participation is not freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is very good, I defend it, but participation is co-responsibility, is rights and duty. But this is mean that when there is a legislation going on, we want to be part of it, not as not in a manner of that we are allowed to speak about it. No, we want to be part of the process. We want to be at the same level as the deputy of Vicente Delors was saying, at the same level to bring our competencies inside as a wiki legislation. We want to be amending in the same level as a deputy does. And I think we cannot have a future without wiki legislation, collaboration institution, and if we don't have that, we will have just barbarism and authoritarianism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simona. Now we move to the third panelist. Let me remind you that you can also be tweeting your ideas and comments using the hashtag eDemocracyBCN. We encourage you to do so. So Artur Serra is the next speaker. Artur Serra is the Deputy Director of I2CAT, Foundation, a research center. He is the Vice President as well of the European Network of Living Labs. He is doctor in anthropology for the University of Barcelona. He has developed his ethnographic field work in the School of Computer Science of Carnegie Mellon University, where he met the artificial intelligence community, DARPA, and the internet at the 90s. Since then, he has founded different centers and labs like Canet, Center for Internet Applications, and I2CAT Foundation here in Barcelona. Also in the middle of 90s, he began to support and study community networks in several districts here in Barcelona, like Ravalnet, Nou Barris Net, and Cornellà Net next to Barcelona. From this experience, he co-created City Lab, the first European citizens laboratory inaugurated in 2007. During that time, he joins the European Network of Living Lab, for which now he is the Vice President, which was created in Helsinki in 2006. That's a global organization gathering more than 150 open living labs, mainly in Europe, but also around the world. Well, more recently, he's conducting a research group on living labs and digital social innovation at I2CAT Foundation, putting in place the CAT Labs network, an innovative project oriented to set up a regional alliance of the different families of labs, be it living labs, fab labs, telecenters, science shops, among others, as part of the regional innovation strategy of Catalonia. The underlying hypothesis is looking for the generation of an open, collaborative, and universal innovation system in Catalonia as part of the new citizen-centric, European citizen-centric system. So, Dr. Serra, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Albert, for inviting I2CAT to this event and co-creation this event with the government and your company. I will explain a little bit my experience of 20 years of an anthropology surrounded by computer scientists and engineers in the world of the internet. Can you change the slides? Yes, yes. And the reason of this is changing or not? Okay, fine. Okay, before that, right. A little slow, the system, but anyway. This is the internet, okay? A few years ago. And the internet has special characteristics that I would like to highlight. First of all, it was designed during the Cold War. And the idea was that any central power could take control of this network. Because at that time, US was in war with the Cold War with Russia, and was totally afraid of this kind of central model that the traditional telecom system had. In a traditional network, you're beginning with the core networks, and then you build the access networks, okay? But this is a totally different architecture in relation with internet. Internet was designed from the edges. It's the end-to-end principle, because you have a computer scientist here and computer scientist there, and then it's something in the middle to connect. They are not designed from the classical model. And that has created this graphic of Paul Robert about the difference between a centralized system, a decentralized system, and a distributed system. Maybe still internet is not a distributed system, but at least it's a decentralized system with the possibility of going back to the centralized system that I will explain, or going forward to the distributed system. This is one characteristic very important. But the second one is even more important, that internet was the platform of the research community, especially the computer science community in the United States. That means that it was designed, of course, with the funding of DARPA, but but were designed by the scientific community as the platform for developing their own research and innovation. That means that these networks were designed for research and innovation from the research and innovation. And sometimes we forget that. We forget, for example, that Tim Berners-Lee, when we designed the World Wide Web, was just with the same philosophy, is creating a platform for the physicists around the world to having this collaboratory in order to develop. When the internet was commercialized, what we have seen is a lot of connectivity, a lot of services, but we are losing this kind of idea that the internet as a collaboratory, as a platform for research and innovation. And this is very important to recover this idea. I will explain what. The next step. Oh, sorry. Slan, okay. Okay, this is an internet experiment. For us, it's a kind of when you have a technology, you need to validate it. Okay, this is the validation of the internet architecture. October 1st is the first time that the hypothesis that a central government cannot control the network is there. Because at the end, the people voted. And they voted using this kind of very strange, still to research kind of a structure that didn't allow this kind of attacks from the central governments, even with dismantling of the autonomous government, because at the same time the CETITI was dismantled, the people achieved to vote. And this is a very important lesson for designing the political systems. The people use the architecture of the internet, but they use it also for doing these kind of innovations with the universal census, etc. And this is an experiment for us, very primary experience to develop what I will explain later about the political systems in the digital era. Okay, on the other side, you have this kind of contra-internet model that we are seeing not only in China, of course. Remember, the majority of the internet users are now in China, 700 million, but also in the States with all this kind of use of the internet for other kind of purposes, fake news, etc. Of course, not research and innovation particularly. That means that there is real danger of going back to the previous model, more centralized. In 1996, I wrote an article for La Vanguardia, say Internet and Catalonia, because coming from the States as an anthropologist, I was seeing the possibility that effectively this kind of distributed network could connect with the civil society background and the structure of the Catalonia. And that article was interesting in order also to inspire this kind of I2CAT Foundation and other institutions that is based in the same principles, that you need to collaborate, you need to create this kind of rough consensus and running code that is a motto of the Internet Engineering Task Force. And I'm really happy that after 20 years, some of these principles has been validated in the political situation we have now in the country. Okay, but it's time to formalize some kind of open laboratory just for this digital citizenship in order to learn from digital citizenship, but also offer to the digital citizenship from the research community a platform, an open platform to, again, continue the experiment. Because if not, there is a danger that the experiment is finished, even is forget. Some people are interested in forgetting that. And this is interesting because we have in the political context, and even I would say the European words to favor that. For example, in Europe now is very common say open innovation, open science, and open to the world. Or for example, mission-driven research and innovation. I mean, Europe is beginning to learn some of the basic principles of the culture that create the internet. And this is interesting to begin to adopt in this open lab, these kind of principles and offering this open lab as a, to the world also from this experience. It's interesting to see that until now, all the eDemocracy, or the majority, is at the end of the political process. The political process ends in voting, okay? But remember that decision-making is only one part of the decision of the policy process. The initial part is as much important of the decision-making, is the policy-making. And this is particularly important when you don't know where you're going. And I will put some example of the policy making and the limits of the policy making. At the end of the 70s, in Catalonia was a big movement for creating the Congrés de Cultura Catalana, the Catalan Cultural Congress. And that was a policy making process, very important. And it was a lot of consensus because the people, majority, wanted to move from a dictatorship to a democracy. That means that it was clear consensus where we are going to go. But the problem now is that we are not exactly where we're going to go. Because when we say, for example, digital republic, okay, but what is digital republic? Are there any country in the world that has built a digital republic? No. And then you need to invent it. And then you need to elaborate the policies for a digital republic. And this is the crucial point, not only in Catalonia, of course, but in the political systems around the world, is if we are entering, if in the knowledge society, with all these kind of digital technologies, we have only the infrastructure of this knowledge society. Because what we are doing until now is connecting the old structures, economy, politics, etc., to the new infrastructure. We are digitalizing the rest of a structure. But as you know, and you can experience in your universities, putting a computer in a classroom, it doesn't change the curriculum, it doesn't change necessarily the system of education. It can be totally the same system of education, but with a computer. One of the experiences we had in the city in Barcelona, for example, is that we collaborated in constructing this kind of wonderful software, and the most voted initiative of the citizens was covering the Travesera de Dalt, where it's not exactly too innovative. That means you can get the surprise that you can get a wonderful decision-making process to repeat the same political models that you have 200 years ago. And this is a big problem, a big problem. And the reason of that is because we don't understand the possibility that this internet infrastructure could be at the same time a laboratory, but not a closed, high-level laboratory in secret department of the UPC. No, a living lab, an open laboratory. And this is the difference between our situation and, for example, the Congrés de Cultura Catalana. The Congrés de Cultura Catalana, with 12,000 people participating in different Catalan countries, it was a forum, it was a congress. Because in a congress, you have more or less consensus that you can enrich, even you can debate political initiatives inside the same framework, because you have the same framework. But we still don't, we don't have now the same framework. We need to invent the framework. And this is why it is so important to understand the need, the urgent need of countries that want to develop society, the digital societies or knowledge society, to grasp the idea of the laboratories. In the last 10 years, the net was the meme. Everyone was a net, okay? Network, society network, internet, etc. But now it's the lab, because the net is already. What we don't have is the lab. We don't have the idea of the World Wide Web. The idea that everyone, 4 billion people, has now the same infrastructure that 20 years ago we have the research community, but they don't have the lab. Oh no, they have labs, but we are not still recognizing that, because there is an explosion of lab out of the scope of the official innovation and research system, a lot of them. Not only living labs, or not only city labs, or fab labs, etc. No. You know the Bible labs? I mean, the public libraries in this country are beginning to create a program to becoming living labs. 2 days ago, it was a meeting of the science museums in Europe, here in Barcelona, and the topic was, and they invite me, how to transform the science museums in citizens' lab. There are movements in schools saying, okay, we're a school, but we want to do also innovation, kind of edu labs. I mean, there is a spirit we can grasp that over this infrastructure, there is a booming of society building for new solutions, for inventing, for learning how to innovate. And this is a great opportunity for policy making. Even in Brussels, are doing a policy lab. In Brussels, that is a very centralized structure in the European Union. Why not here? Or why not in municipalities? Why not to invite citizens to begin to elaborate the new policies that they will decide? After that, in voting, I agree with all of that. But don't begin with the end, beginning with the beginning, because we are at the beginning, not at the end. And this is a little bit my proposal. My proposal is take the opportunity in this country collecting all the efforts for, of course, government activists, researchers, companies, civil society, etc. This variety, this jungle of institutions, and of course, labs, to building these open innovation policy labs. And this is a little bit the commitment and the compromise of I2CAT for the next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Artur. Thank you so much. And last but not least, we've got Robert Bjarnason with us. Just to remind you, we'll have some time for an open discussion with all of you after Robert's presentation. And at the end, there's going to be a cup of cava, una copa de cava offered by CiviCity after this gathering. So Robert landed last night from Iceland. He's the CEO and co-founder of Citizens Foundation. He's a successful entrepreneur that introduced the web to Iceland as early as 1993 and to Denmark in 1995. Before co-founding the Citizens Foundation in the year 2008, he worked in the online gaming industry, where his team received many industry awards. You will explain it, I'm sure, but just in a nutshell, Citizens Foundation is a non-profit organization which is based in Reykjavik and which was created 10 years ago in the aftermath of the Icelandic economic and trust collapse. They've been given several eDemocracy awards, just to mention one, the one which awarded its Better Neighborhoods project in Reykjavik, which is a participatory budgeting project, and they were awarded the Nordic Best Practice 2015 award. So Robert, this is your talk, please.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I was actually first here in Barcelona introducing our projects with Simona in 2012. It's almost 6 years ago. Yeah, it was in October 2012. And that was also when we were sort of 4 years old, the Citizens Foundation. We started in October 2008. And I want to tell you a little bit about our projects, what we do, and what sort of our vision is. And but let me first, tell you a little bit about Iceland. So Iceland has one of the oldest running parliaments in the world. That's basically, from the 870. So it's over 1,100 years old. It's pretty old. And over the years, it has had a lot of. I'm trying to. Oh, here you go. It's a bit slow. Yes. Okay. So and over the years, it has a lot of trust in society. It's been the sort of foundation of a trust, and it's been evolving slowly. And 100 years ago, as you see in this photo, this was a typical way of going to the polling station. You would take your horse, or you'd walk. You would even walk for many days. People used to walk from the countryside to the city to take part in this process. But then time has moved on. The car came to Iceland, and we had the first computers in the 60s. The internet, as I said, we brought that there in 93. But the democratic system hasn't evolved very much. It's still more or less the same as it was 100 years ago. And it all came to a head in 2008 during the financial crisis. Well, when the financial crisis happened, it was basically all the commercial banks went bankrupt in a matter of 10 days. And people were really, over a period of 2-3 weeks, it was likely that everybody would lose all their money. So all the bank accounts would go to zero, basically. Everything was lost, So the trust in this 1,100-year old institutions that's running in 70-80% went down to 7%, just in a matter of, like 2 weeks or something like that. And so I was actually living in London at the time, and we started, me and Gunnar Grimsson, my co-founder, we started the Citizens Foundation to try to sort of make true one of the promises of the early internet, which was to, really everybody could have a voice. But the internet has really not evolved, very well in that direction. I mean, yes, everybody can speak, but really the loudest voices have been the ones that are the most heard. So we started to experiment with different sort of processes on basically, using the internet to, connect citizens directly to policymakers to give them real influence. Not only give them a voice where they can
say something to the politicians. I mean, they can do that anyway, you know, just on Facebook, whatever. But to actually to give them a real influence. And we've been developing a set of open source tools and solutions. And I'm not going to go into much detail about this, but we have a sort of idea generation policy crowdsourcing tool called Your Priorities. We have a budget voting tool called Open Active Voting. And then underlying it all, we're using quite a bit of artificial intelligence technology. But, I'm not going to go into much detail on that part in this presentation. So, and we've our open source projects have expanded around the world. We have our platforms, open source platforms, have been used in over 20 countries so far, and also sort of interesting projects. But first, really quickly on how Your Priorities works. So the basic idea with Your Priorities is a tool to build a dialogue. It's like a co-creation tool where citizens can debate and talk to politicians and civil servants. And that over 1.5 million people have used Your Priorities, the past 9 years since we launched the first version. And it's quite simple. It's all about adding ideas and then debating those ideas. And the thing is that when we launched our first project in 2009 called Shadow Parliament, we had like a forum-style discussion system, like you see on Facebook, where you have, where people discuss. And right away, the first night we had launched it, people were talking about fisheries policy. Then two people in the discussion got into a really heated personal argument, and we had to start to delete a lot of comments, So we started to think, is there a better way? Can we, come up with a process of debating that's, a bit more practical? I'm going to try to go through this slowly. These are just some screenshots from the platform. You can also check it online. So what we think, so we started to think, so what about if the debate is more like a university debate, where two people are have their space and time to come up with points for their ideas or against it. They should not be facing each other, screaming at each other. I'm sure they do that sometimes, but that's not the idea. So we've been experimenting with and evolving this debating system, which is really, really simple. It's basically that you have an idea, and this is actually, you won't see the text, but it is translated into English, but this is actually from an education policy crowdsourcing in the city of Reykjavik last year, where somebody put in the forward the idea of reintroducing the New Testament as a mandatory thing in the Icelandic school system, and there's religious freedom laws in Iceland that forbid it. So you had a debate that went viral, both within people who feel really strong about reintroducing sort of Christianity and atheists. And they debated and debated and debated, and we did not have to delete a single comment, And actually, even if it did not change my mind with religious freedom, it made me understand the point of people who did want to reintroduce the New Testament back. I understood them better, and what their motivation were. They were not like some, crazy people or anything, And so out of it is basically it's like quite focused output, and we have the best ideas, from those processes, and then with the best debate points for and against, people can vote those up and down. But the key why the debating system works so well is because when you see a debate point that you don't like, you can vote it down, or you can vote it up if you like it, but you can't comment on it directly. You can't say oh, I know who your father is or something like that. What people say, sometimes in those things. But you have to write a counterpoint that is separate, and it's separate in the user interface. So, and this is like magical almost, And in all those, different 20 countries we worked in, and people will come to us, oh no, and I went to Bulgaria, the project there. Oh, in Bulgaria, you see Facebook in Bulgaria, people are horrible, it's going to be a total mess. It wasn't, people behaved and they took part in, yeah. And so quickly, some example projects. So we have Better Reykjavik, which is our sort of, flagship project. It's been going now for 8 years. And it keeps on growing, and there's more policies there, and so on. And one of the aspects of that is this is from the homepage. There you can see all the different participation projects that are going on, and also older projects. And one of the features is that there's an agenda-setting tool that every month people can come up with ideas, and then the top ideas are discussed in the different city committees. It's an idea about tourism. It's discussed in the tourism. And And during that process, everything is written down, and everybody gets an email that liked the idea or didn't like it, on the platform. So each step of the process, people get an email. But there's not a right of choosing. And then we also have a participatory budgeting project, which is about 7% of the city investment budget is given directly over to citizens. And there's some more, few more sort of screenshots here. Yeah, here we go. And this is from the participatory budgeting. And to see this map functionality, there's ideas everywhere. And the past 2 years, we're getting over 1,000 ideas, in this process, which is almost too much for the city. It's become a capacity problem for the city to actually deal with all this participation. I call that a luxury problem for sure. Mm-hmm. And then last year, as I mentioned earlier, the education policy crowdsourced the new education policy until 2030 in 2 stages online. There was also a lot of meeting with teachers, with parents, and students, and so on. And at the end of the process, over so 15 to 20% of the final policy comes from this online activities. So people could have made real influence on the policy. It was not just, just tell us what you like, we won't even listen to you. French Parliament, senators in the French Parliament are using the platform for crowdsourcing questions, to the majority, and a bunch of others. But I don't have the time to go over this. But you can go to citizens.is and check out, a bunch of case studies there. And so quickly on the open active voting tool. So this is our budget game, really, our budget gamified budget voting tool. So you select your neighborhood. And then you have the choice of selecting a bunch of projects. You can see how much they cost. Every citizen has the whole budget for the neighborhood. So if the budget is 50 million crowns, that's every citizen has 50 million, and they can spend it all. Basically, they choose the projects. What they would, if they were the mayor, how would you spend the whole amount in your neighborhood? And through this process, we get quite a fine-grained sort of prioritization, and also it's fun. People like it. And now we have over 600, it's almost 700 projects now that have gone through the process and be built in the neighborhood. So I'm sure you have a participatory budget project here, you know how it is. And so it's like, it's worked really, really well. And it keeps on growing. We just had our record in Iceland in the participatory budgeting was 18%, but the city of Reykjavik was a record now in a couple of weeks ago of 12.5% participation, and it's always growing, and it's double digit, and it's really it works. So here are just some photos from just some of the projects that have been there, and just move on, and I'm sure if you know about those things. And we've also done, quite a bit of projects around Europe. We spent a year consulting with the Madrid Decide project, which is sort of partly based on the Reykjavik model, and many others. Just some final words. So participation needs to be fun. It can't be like totally bureaucratic and boring. Don't do that. It's not like people are not going to want to participate in it. There's just too many other distractions and options that people can have. You need to reward your citizen. You need to reward them by listening to them. There needs to be a tangible something in it for them, And people are not, if it's just like something where you can add your idea that maybe somebody would listen to you, it doesn't work. I mean, people are not stupid. They don't fall for that. I mean, they don't, participate in large amount in those sort of processes. So reward them, really appreciate their time, because, it's a lot of time, spent if you take hundreds of thousands of citizens participating in a project. If you add it all up, it's a lot of man years. And communication is absolutely critical. You have to have a credible marketing strategy, because if people do not know about an opportunity to participate, there's a 100% chance they won't participate. It's a better chance if they do know about it. And in the case of Reykjavik, a lot of them are interested. Participation is in high demand. Another quick point, I think it's very important that the infrastructure of democracy is kept public. Mm-hmm. With the movement of democracy online, there's really a big danger of basically that will be privatizing our democratic infrastructure just without even thinking about it. We'll put this voting process, the participation in the cloud, it's become privatized. Final slide, and some breaking news. So since yesterday, we launched version 8 of our platform. So this year, over 60% of our users participate on mobile phones. And we've seen a problem where, I mean, it's increased the participation. It keeps on growing because of all the phones. But there's 50% less text-based content sent in on the mobile phones, like ideas or debate points. And I know that being 46 myself, using a mobile phone to write a big essay is not my favorite thing in the world. And even for young people, they don't really write a lot of long text on mobile. So we're introducing audio and video ideas, so people can submit their ideas just by speaking it in, and then we use artificial intelligence to automatically convert the voice to text. So we have the best of both worlds, where you can actually interact with voice or video. And this was launched yesterday, and you can actually try it yourself. You go to yrpri.org. And on a secondary, because I'm here, so we're working with a nonprofit in Tarragona that's experimenting with technology. And we already have Spanish translation of the platform, but those guys in Tarragona just sent me a Catalan translation yesterday that I will add next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. So now we have time for some questions. Please don't be shy. Podeu preguntar en català. You can ask in Catalan or in English, because there's going to be translation if needed. Sisplau.
Yes. Hello. Thank you. Thank you for the presentations. I had 2 questions to the last guest. The first one was related to the population distribution in Iceland. We are not aware of what's the landscape and how the population is distributed, and whether this has an impact on their rate of participation. The question would be, have you measured this? Has it any impact? And the second question is related to your first point. During the financial crisis, there was a drop, a big drop, you would say, in terms of the credibility of the institutions. Have you measured the impact of your software in the quality of the democracy, in the perception of the quality of the democracy in Iceland? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. So yes, Iceland is a very tiny country. There's only 350,000 people. It's quite sort of the internet is the highest internet penetration in the world. It has the highest Facebook usage percent-wise in the world. So it is quite a good country for doing those sort of experiments, because it has a very, the demographics, fits well with it. And, but it is still quite a, regular European country, It's like I'm coming here, and being connected to, Spain, Barcelona for many, many years, in different ways. There's not a lot of difference in how people are or how they interact with democracy and so on. Nothing special there. The only thing that's a difference is just that the scale is so small, And so in Iceland, we've mostly been working on the local level, in terms of empowering, people in the city and so on. And there's been some research on the effectiveness of those policies, but I think that, and yes, it does help to, build up trust to actually work directly with people, and it's and for the politicians, the idea of that, if you're a politician, that if you support those sort of participation processes, and you say, well, I'm going to listen to you now, that is usually a vote winner. So we have no politicians, trying to officially stop this process. But obviously politicians are, even if they all say, yes, we like it, some of them might be more committed than others.
More questions?
Hi there. First of all, I would like to congratulate the 4 of you. It's been a wonderful speech. I wanted to raise two issues. One, the first is participation. I think the only participation that I think citizens may be interested in is enforceable participation, in the sense that it's very nice to participate if we should cover the street or build a park. But I think citizens would be more interested in those choices that are made by these methods. We would like them to be enforceable so that we don't need to trust a third party to do whatever they say they would do in their political programs. So to me, that's a very important point, the enforceable participation. And the second, everything that we have spoken about in here today, the digital governance, all these systems are based upon net neutrality, right? And I would like to raise that is, to me, it wouldn't be logical to build all these systems if we don't build truly free and uncontrolled networks. Because as we saw in last October and last September, the network neutrality was broken. So I don't understand, and many citizens don't understand, why we are not devoting more resources to community networks, for example, such as WeFeed.net, which we are pioneers, I would say, in the world. And we are giving hundreds of millions of euros each year to private companies, private telecoms that in let's say that this way, they're not interested in opening their infrastructures. So there's something that needs to be pushed from the local administration because it doesn't make sense to build cars and build trucks if you don't build the highways. And if another entity controls the highways, everything we're speaking about, it may result ineffective, let's say like that. So that's it. That's just, I don't know if you want to add any issue regarding this.
Thank you so much. Dr. Creamer, would you like to come in and reply to this question, or otherwise, please, Simona.
I'm not an authority, so I cannot promise anything for the authority, but I absolutely agree with you. And the only thing, when I, as an activist or citizen lobbyist, talk about this with the institution, I absolutely agree with you. We have Wi-Fi net here and is not pushed enough. But I also have to, at the previous step. So I think if we want to substitute corporation, not only with the infrastructure, for example, also for the software, for the hardware, for the all the digital infrastructure in general, for example, Generalitat, we are lacking of a previous step, which is not, I also think, is not done enough. But there is no local or citizen-ruled organization or companies strong enough to really substitute the big guys. So we have first to create a ground, a better ground, and it's urgent because I really agree with you. We cannot happen again that we are controlled by outside, and but we have also to ask as civil society. We have to ask what you ask, that we have to put more, we have this pioneer and we have to take Wi-Fi net much more seriously. But also we have to give tools in order that we have an ecosystem of companies controlled by citizens and networked that can be a really substitute of the big guy. And I agree completely about the fact that up till now, except some occasion, normally the participation that we are offered is not enforceable. Is also, as Robert say, they treat like a bit stupid. As I said in another conference the other day, the participation is not per kilo. How many kilo of people have participated? Oh, I am a democratic government because I have 10 kilos of people participating. I don't care. It's not a matter of the government if we participate or not. It's not their problem. They have to give us tools, which are really tools for participation. We are not stupid. If it's just wasting time, we are already participating seriously somewhere else. So stop calculating us as kilo and give us the possibility of bringing a serious proposal, enforceable. And to do that, we always ask that the first part, the information part, it's important. You give us, oh, please, if you want a budget, just invent it yourself or read these thousands of pages. Hey, wait a moment. I pay you in order to give me the information so that I don't waste time and I understand the question properly. The second step is moderation, because we all participate, we bring a lot of information, and the answer from the institution is, oh, thank you very much for your participation. No, I have proposed something, tell me where and when is being forced and why. And the third thing, as you say, that then it's really enforceable. For example, the mythic ruling of participation of the city of Barcelona is just absurd. It's Woody Allen thing. It's a lot of work for the citizen to prepare, to do, educated by we don't know who. And then the last page is, and then in the government of the city, we will see if we accept it or not. So it's the opposite way around. We, the people, decided if we accept or not what you say. It's not the other way around.
Yes. One of the lessons of the October 1st will be understand what you are doing, what you are saying. If you want a national sovereignty and read the autodetermination, which are the infrastructure you need. Because we have learned, the previous scheme we had before October 1st is that we can bring any kind of multinationals, companies from every part of the world to help us to develop us as a digital society. But maybe after October 1st, this is not true. There are some companies that are not interested. And this is the reason is very simple. We still believe in the Silicon Valley model that the American has sold to us, to Europe. But this is not true. It's not true at all. The Americans are supported Silicon Valley with the public funding research to universities that then transfer to the Silicon Valley. And the Google driverless car is an example. 10 years ago, 10 years before the Google produced this car, the Stanford department has been receiving, Carnegie Mellon, etc., a lot of funding to develop a military vehicle, a driverless military vehicle. And then after 10 years, they give to Google this possibility. In fact, Sebastian Thrun, the professor of artificial intelligence in Stanford, is the head of the driverless car in Google. That means we need to understand a little bit the logic of the high tech. The logic of the high tech is high innovation, high research, and the private sector don't pay high risk. The high risk is paid by us, by the public. And then the profits are to the private sector. Perfect for the profit. But this is the logic of the high tech. More risky in innovation in your society, more collective effort is needed to pay this risk. And for the first time, the European Commission is beginning to understand that when say mission-driven research and innovation. Until now, the researcher has got a lot of money to do our own research. And then the Commission say, okay, you have the money, that's it. No. If you pay me for my research, you obtain the research and you buy it. Because you know why the reason only for doing papers. And this is called mission-driven research that now are beginning to publicize, is the man to the moon. Man to the moon is a new model that Europe is beginning to understand. That the future for Europe, the public research should be public, that means in public benefit. And then you transfer to the private company. This is how the high-tech world in the States, and I was there. And that changed completely the relation with these multinationals and with this kind of Wi-Fi net, etc. This is one point. The second point is more important. We still believe in the core central research and innovation model, not in the edges. And Wi-Fi net was started in the edges, not in the core. It was not from big corporation, big university. No, it was in GURPS, in the periphery, even of Barcelona. And we need to understand that this is the internet model. The internet model is people that innovate in the edges, not necessarily in the center. You know why City Labs in Cornellà? Why? City Labs in Cornellà, an industrial district peripheral totally to the city of Barcelona, because the city of Barcelona at that time were building the website of the city of Barcelona. It has no interest in funding a radical new idea, Citizens Laboratory. And we need to learn about that and the relation between Barcelona and Catalonia, between Catalonia and the rest of the world. Very important very important lesson for the internet. How the motor of the innovation in the future, where come from? Is from the traditional big institutions, big players that are benefiting from the current society, or from the periphery of the system? And this is interesting for discussion. Okay.
Més preguntes?
Hola, bueno, jo faré la pregunta en català si no és...
Cap problema,
si no
we'll translate.
Vale, gràcies. Sí. M'he deixat cap? Me l'autoritza. Vale. S'ha insistit bastant que la participació ciutadana des de la part digital s'ha de donar o s'ha de portar a terme amb eines d'open source, de codi obert. La meva pregunta va dirigida als ponents en tant que on queda el principi d'eficàcia i eficiència en l'administració pública, perquè no sé si hi ha evidència suficient en tant que les eines d'open source són més eficients a nivell de costos i més eficaces, i per tant on queden aquí els agents del mercat que des del seu expertise poden oferir també eines que no són de codi tancat i que poden oferir també un servei en aquest sentit de la participació ciutadana igualment eficient o més i igualment eficaç. Gràcies.
So the question is, there's been a lot of talk that citizen participation tools have to be open source. And the question is around where does that leave the concept or the principle of efficiency and effectiveness of public administration, because you're not sure if the open source tools have been proven to be truly effective or efficient to the same extent that we expect nowadays, and if it's possible to create these kind of open source tools that would maintain or increase efficiency and effectiveness of public administration.
Okay, let me start. Well, I mean, the internet, right? I mean, the internet is run on open source tools. I mean, the core infrastructure of the internet is built on open source tools. And I think that it's not a big stretch in thinking, that when we're thinking about infrastructure for democracy, that those should be, fully capable, even if they are open source. And I mean, I think that one of the key elements of open source is participation in terms of that. So, for example, the web servers that drive the internet, Apache, Lynx, and a couple others, they're built by thousands, tens of thousands of people. The core operating system of the internet, Linux, that's hundreds of thousands of people have contributed and participated in that, built that together to make it work really, really well in almost any situation. And so open source has like this affinity with participation and democracy that's sort of more on quite a deep level, And I think that, it's but yes, obviously, we've seen failures in open source. For example, in Europe, 5-10 years ago, there came this thing about, let's open source our desktops. And then, let's put open source software on the desktop, like, instead of Excel and those tools, and that was really, I was just thinking at the time, oh man, that's a really bad decision, because you're actually replacing really capable tools with tools that are not capable. So obviously that needs to be, but thankfully, we have many really excellent, highly capable open source participation platform. One here, right from Barcelona, Decidim. It's a great tool. Consul, the sister or brother of Decidim in Madrid, and our tools are all open source and many others. So, it already open source and participation already has a pretty good track record.
Robert from Estonia, you want to come in?
Basically, we have written a publication, I think it's some 3 years ago, for the International Idea, the Democracy Institute in Stockholm, Sweden, about open source and elections. And basically what we're saying there is you can't use any electronic democracy or electronic voting tools that are not open source, right? I mean, it is something that goes against the idea of democracy. And as such, you at least need to have an understanding what it's running on. Ideally, of course, if you have something like Linux, that we actually would get at one point an operating system for democracy tools, right? That is open source and has been created by many people. I mean, it would be the ideal idea, right? But we know that this is not happening so far, and there are professional companies that are doing that. But at least what they should do is give us access to how it works. Yeah.
1 minute for last question. Yes.
Thank you. As a citizen, I see that you've been proposing that we participate all the time and in many spaces, in many places. Robert says that we have 2 different tools applied like 12,000 times in a tiny island. Artur says that I have to work at the micro level at my civil society entity, but also at the meso level on a network of networks. Well, this is a mess. So imagine that I worked for the government and I saw that you're proposing this very much huge scenario of different things which are growing exponentially and without control. What would you say to this guy in the government? Hey, you can make sense of all this ecosystem by doing this or that. Thank you.
I'll do a quick one, maybe to just do another last round. Well, you know, yes, there's a lot of options. You know, there's a lot of different processes you can try. I mean, people are doing participatory budgeting, they're doing policy crowdsourcing, they're doing parliamentary elections. You know, we've covered all those different subjects today. But as with any sort of innovation, because when it happens in a city or a local government or national government, it is innovation. You're actually, you know, innovating, you know, in terms of that. Yes, the tools are there, but that's not the innovation. The innovation is that how can you open up your processes on the government side in a useful way for the bureaucracy, for the politicians. You know, it should not have to be an adversarial process where it's like, oh, you know, we really have to. I really wish I wouldn't have to open for those citizens. It's going to be problems. You know, it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't have to be like that. It should really benefit, you know, both you know, bureaucracies, politicians, and citizens. But as with any experiment and innovation like this, start with something small and simple, and move from there. And that's sort of the lean thinking, the agile thinking, which is all the rage now, and sort of design thinking, you know, all those buzzword heaven, is that you know. But it's true, it works. You know, start with something tangible and small, and make it work, and then move on and to the next great thing.
Yes, I'm against this consumism of participation because it will be not effective. My offering is help us to think different, because the political participation will follow also this kind of automatization process. And what is the more automatized part of the process? Yes, the last part. What is where the citizens can add value in policy elaboration, not in the moment of decision. But we have started with this because we are still thinking in the metaphor of the tool. The technology is a tool. The technology is a culture. It's a culture of innovation. The tool is the result of technology. The internet is not technology. It's the result of a knowledge of technology, knowledge that produced the tool. And when we change this mindset, because you are maybe in one research center and you understand that before the technology, there is a proposal that someone offered to the authorities or whatever, and there is no technology yet, there is a knowledge of technology that produced finally a tool, you begin to understand that we are in this moment, help the knowledge we still don't have. This is interesting, your priorities, because you're not saying your decision, no. What do you think? What do you want is the question. And what do you want differently? Because what you want is already there. And then it's help us to think different. This is the participation key word now. Thinking different, not acting equal, acting different to do the same. This is consumism participation. That will be a lot of consumerism. You go to buy things, or you go to participate without no innovation, and you become exhausted because effectively all the things are city, commission, European Commission. No, but to where? Where we are going? What do you want? This is the point. Help us to think differently. This is
yes. Dr. Kremer from Estonia, final remarks or? Okay, thank you. So thank you so much to all of you, to the panelists, to all of you who have decided to come here this morning to the Palau Robert, to all those following us on internet, and you know that you are all invited now to a cup of cava, of Catalan sparkling wine by City, which in fact is a startup which was born here in Barcelona. It's also interesting to remind these kind of things. Thank you so much, and we'll keep on fighting for a better democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We are in touch.
Yeah, let's keep it
through Alberto.
Yeah. Totally.
No, ara no, la
Your call will be disconnected.